coordinating.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
With all the spirit.
Terry's here tonight to talk about life on a cattle ranch.
All right.
Oh, sorry, that was the other speaker. Fortunately, Terry's gonna fill in and talk about wildlife oddities. Maybe our neighbors, maybe not, I don't know. But thanks for coming, and this is our last event for the season, so if you have any ideas of what you want to know about next year, talk to Susie and say, we'd like to have somebody come speak about who knows what.
We'll probably try to contact you all by emails between now and next season, just to kind of touch base, see what you thought of the season, and then again, if you have any suggestions on next year's numbers, so. Yeah.
And before I forget, I do want to thank Amari, Terry, Susie, who have been setting this up and scheduling all this and getting all the speakers here, getting the word out. So thank them very much for all this hosting. And we're doing better now at getting recordings on the website.
A little bit better, yes.
GVMecology.com. Just a little plug there. So I'm going to turn it over to our own very knowledgeable Terry Campbell and let him take over. Thank you.
Susie wants the star pattern to show for you.
Watch this.
But I don't.
Oh, buzzkill.
What's happening in my life? Anyway, so Taylor Archuleta from Lone Pine Ranch was originally scheduled to give this program, but life on a cattle ranch is pretty rough, and so a lot of things that she needed to address came up kind of at the last minute, so she was unable to show up. So as a result, I am the relief speaker, to use baseball terminology. And what we're going to do is talk about a little bit about the nature around us. And there it is. And so what I'm going to do, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to take a stroll down the Trail Nature Trail and to see what we can find. And we might find some oddities. And what I mean by oddities is you might be hiking along, you spot something, you go, what the deuce is that? Or, wow, that's odd. And so it's an oddity when you first see it. But if you research it out and study it a little bit, then it no longer is an oddity, right? So you take that off the oddity list. Anyway, as we stroll down the Krellin Nature Trail, I'll point out some of my oddities that I have found. And when I say stroll, most people, when they go on our hiking trails, they go for a hike. And that's at a rapid pace, right? It's at a pace where you miss a lot. But if you just saunter, if you just kind of amble along and look around, that's when you're going to discover things. Kind of same thing, like if you're driving in your car, you miss a lot. You pick up more if you're on a bicycle. But you can pick up even more if you're just walking down the road. So let's take a stroll down the Krellin Nature Trail. If this thing will advance. I might have you advance them. There we go. So we'll start off with a few plants. Out of the multitude of plants out there, I've discovered some kind of odd ones. So it's late June, and have you seen these around? So if you look, you can see like, oh well, this is that in focus for everyone?
Yeah, we're working on it, huh?
What, with your glasses?
Oh, there you go.
That's better.
Stay.
Yes.
Anyway, so you might see, it's like, oh, look at these, interesting, you might think that they're mushrooms popping out of the ground. Then you look around, it's like, wow, you've got some pretty tall stems here. And, we have the next slide. Then if you look at some of them, they actually are in bloom. This is, probably now it's August. And then those stems that were coming out of the ground now have these interesting kind of urn-shaped flowers. If I could have the next slide. And any time of the year, you might actually see these. They are those really dry stalks. These are all dried out, and those urn-shaped flowers, which are drooping down, are all dried up. And these things can be around for years. They can be in that stage of, if they don't get bumped or trampled on or whatever, they could stay in that form for quite a number of years. This does not seem to be working.
Okay.
Sorry. So what you should have noticed is this kind of reddish brown leafless stalk coming out of the ground. Doesn't have any branches, and there's no green color. And when you see a plant that doesn't have green color, you know it doesn't have chlorophyll. Doesn't have chlorophyll, then it's not what? Photosynthesizing. So if it's not photosynthesizing, then how does it make its living? Must be parasitic.
Steals from others.
It steals from others. Also, those those flowers or in August, they have these capsule-like fruits that hang downward from these tiny little stems that come off the main stalk. Sorry, Mari, but I don't have to ask you. You look relaxed. Anyway, these are woodland pine drops. And the reason why they're called pine drops is because of the droopy appearance of the flower and the fruit. They're a member of the Araceae family, which is the Heath family. And other members of that family you might be familiar with, like rhododendrons, blueberries, and huckleberries. And these are all flowers with plants with all urn-shaped flowers. Also, these woodland pine drops are a member of a subfamily, which is the Monotropaceae, which is the Indian pipe family. And this particular group, are mycoheterotrophs, which means they are consumers of fungi, or they're mycoparasitic, which means they're fungal parasites. So our woodland pine drops are actually mycoparasites. Sorry, Mari.
Yeah.
So what they are is they're a root parasite, and so they depend on their association with the mycorrhizal fungi that are under the ground. So they, as we noticed, they produce little chlorophyll. So the mycorrhizal fungi, since they're not producing any food of their own, they tap into these mycorrhizal fungi, which are in a symbiotic relationship with our pine trees, like our ponderosa pines. And so they utilize this vast underground mycelium that's under the ground. You don't know it's there because you're walking on top of it. It's all under your feet. If I can have the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So what are mycorrhizal fungi? These are fungi that are in a symbiotic relationship with conifer trees. And like our ponderosa pines. And they tap into the tree root systems. I've got some schematics here to demonstrate this, but they tap into the root system to absorb the carbohydrates, the sugars, as it were, that are produced by the trees through photosynthesis. And in return, they supply the roots of the trees with minerals and water that become more available to the tree because of the breakdown of the soil with the mycelium. And however, pine drops, they tap into those fungi, the mycelium, and they steal. They steal from the not only the fungus, but they are also stealing from the tree because they're stealing the carbohydrates that are produced. Tree. Thank you. Now you're back.
Little rascals.
Next slide, please. These pine drops, they are so dependent on these mycorrhizal fungi that they even require the fungal enzymes to help their seeds develop. So in other words, if you're going out and you go, oh, I'd like to, these are interesting plants, I'm gonna put them in a pot in my house and in my garden. Well, it's probably not gonna take if you don't bring along the mycorrhizal fungi along with it that they need. So what is this mycorrhizal fungi all about? So they're kind of the unsung heroes of our ecosystem out there. If that wasn't around, we wouldn't have this nice forest environment. And you don't even know it's there, right? It's all under your feet. Until what? Mushrooms pop up, the reproductive structures pop up. Then you know something's going on the ground. And anyway, so there's this plant and fungal mycelium are kind of in symbiosis. They're in constant communication with each other. So here's the fungi here, and there's the reproductive structure, which is called mushrooms. And so this, it ties into all these plants all around us. So these are the trees, the pine trees like the ponderosa pine. And so they're in communication with the, not only are they sharing resources, they're also communicating with each other. So for example, if this ponderosa pine gets hit with some insect, starts chewing on the leaves or the pine borers or whatever, then plants make up natural defenses, chemical defenses they put out to try to stave off further destruction and try to keep their predators at bay, as it were. And so these chemicals get picked up by the mycorrhizal hyphae, and it gets transferred and tells this tree, hey, you better put up some chemical defenses because your buddy over here is being attacked. And so that's the kind of defense that these plants put up with owing to their communication with these mycorrhizal mycelium. So they call this the wood wide web. And so it's, these mycelium are found under nearly every footstep as you're walking through the forest. You know this stuff's under the ground. Next slide, please. So here's how it works. So they believe 90% of land plants have a mutual beneficial relationship with this microbial networks. And so here's the tree, and it's photosynthesizing and it's producing its carbohydrates, sugars as it were, which go down the circulatory system of the tree. In this case, it'd be the phloem, right? Phloem's going down toward the roots. So it's sending down these sugars toward the roots. And when it gets to the roots, these mycelium are tapped into the roots, and they also pick up some of the sugars or carbohydrates that the tree has provided. In turn, the fungus is breaking down the soil, and it makes these minerals and water readily available to the host tree in this case. So they're a symbiotic relationship. So without the fungal mycelium, land ecosystems will fail. And so often we don't treat our soils very well, do we? All the trauma that we put into the soils, and so we're not treating these important fungal mycelium very well. Just on a side note, the largest living organism apparently is a honey mushroom. A single species of honey mushroom that covers about 2,385 acres, which is comparable to 1,350 soccer fields. Yeah, soccer fields. We're football players. Anyway, it's at Malheur National Forest, Oregon. And but most of this is underground. So it's like, well, how do you know? How do they know it covers this? Well, what they would do is using the DNA of this individual fungus, they dig down and test the soil, find it there, and then they move over a little further, dig down until they get way out to this distance. That's how they prove that it covered that larger space. Okay, next slide.
So is it edible?
I think they are.
That big?
All mushrooms are edible at least once. Question was, is it edible? Anyway, so I used to think that panda was the largest, and it probably is in some little category. Largest organism, panda. If you're not familiar with panda, it's a clone of aspen trees that spreads over 106 acres in Utah. It's in the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah. Consists of about 40,000 individual trees. And so it's kind of a unique place. And panda's in trouble because they have too many deer. And what does a deer do? Well, we know what the deer do. Right, so the little clones, the small little saplings of the aspen trees that are trying to grow up, they never get to get big because the deer come around and feed on them. Right, so they've fenced off some sections, but it's so large that they can't fence the whole thing off. So panda's in trouble. Panda needs some wolves, if you would ask. That's just me. Next one. So, just to recap this, so the woodland pine drops and mycorrhizal epithelia fungi, they're all primarily are underground. You never know they're there until their fruiting bodies show up. And so in the case of the woodland pine drops, it's when it flowers, those little pine drop flowers, and the fungi, it's the mushrooms that tell you that they're there. Yep. Okay, we're walking down our Crelin Trail, and it's late June, and we spy these. Kind of another reddish brown stalk coming out of the ground. What the deuce is that? Next slide. If you look at them a little later in June, you notice they're starting to flower. They don't quite look like the flowers of pine drops, do they? Next slide. what do they look like?
Orchids.
Orchids. Next slide. So we should have noticed that they resemble the woodland pine drops, but in close inspection, the flowers are not the egg shaped and they don't hang upside down like the pine drops. They look like orchids because they are.
Yeah.
Next slide. This is western spotted coral root. This is a saprophytic orchid. And like the woodland pine drops, they are also obtain their nutrients from fungal mycelium, because you notice they don't have green on them either. So they're not photosynthesizing. And so they tap into the mycorrhizal mycelium as well. And just like the pine drops, most of their life is spent on the ground. You never know they're around until their reproductive structures, in case they're orchids, come up rising out of the ground. Okay, next. So they parasitize the same ectomycorrhizal family as the pine drops. These are the ones that are a symbiotic relationship with the pine trees. They're called coral roots because the rhizomes, root-like structures of these plants, are kind of knotted up and twisted, and they apparently appear to look like corals. And so, hence, that's how they got their name. And orchids themselves have numerous mycoheterotrophic species, in other words, species that prey upon these fungi because they have lost their ability to photosynthesize. And so, like the woodland pine drops, these guys are eaters. They don't give anything back. They just take. Okay, next. Orchids are interesting because not only are they mycorrhizal eaters, they also are food deceptors. So about 54% of the orchid species do provide some reward for their pollinators, which is nectar. But the other 46%, they are really. So they produce all these chemicals, and not only chemicals, but the way they look and tactile stimuli that fool insects, their pollinators, and give nothing back. So they give nothing back to the pollinators. There's some that will produce chemicals that mimic the pheromones of the female insect. And so that attracts the males, right? So the males come and they help the orchid pollinate their flowers. But they get nothing, no reward. They don't get nectar or anything. So orchids, they may look pretty, but they're nice. Next. So what about our western spotted root? So they are capable of self-pollination, but they also have some insect pollinators as well. Next slide. Howard Evans, who used to be a CSU entomologist, studying our western spotted coral root here along the Coral Nature Trail, and he believes that species of dancefly, that's what dancefly looks like, might contribute to pollinating this plant. Also, mining bees have also been shown to be pollinators of coral root. Next slide. In case you don't know who Howard Evans is, he used to be a resident here in the late 1980s, and he and his wife, Mary, together they actually produced a number of books, which are great reads that talk about the natural history of this area that we live in. And In fact, this one here, Footler talks about living here in Oak Tree Meadows, the natural history. And this is what how it looked like, and they also are the ones that created the Crowell Nature Trail that we are in our minds walking and hiking on in Providence. Next. If you were to go back in time, way back, like 450 million years ago, you would notice that the landscape is dominated by these huge mushrooms. They stand about 29 foot tall, and below them are the newly evolved vascular plants. Next slide. And what paleobotanists have discovered is that these newly evolved vascular plants are actually intertwined with the mycelium, which they call the prototaxite. It's the mycelium of these ancient mushrooms, these giant fungal towers. And so this was suggestive that they were subjected to parasitism way back then. So our coral roots, our woodland freeloaders that were, our coral roots and our pine drops are using old tactics from way back a million years ago to survive. So what they're doing is not new. Just on a side note, Burning Man, you all familiar with Burning Man? Anyway, so Burning Man, there's a art display called Mycelium. This is what it looked like this year's Burning Man. Apparently it was made of mushrooms. And you don't know what Burning Man is, a bunch of artists and musicians. About 70,000 people gathered in this desert. They just recently left, and they call it Black Rock City, Nevada. And they display kind of interesting artwork. They do other crazy stuff there too, but some. Okay, we're hiking along, and so this is in August after heavy rains. And actually, we just had that, right? Heavy rains, August. And you might stumble across a gelatinous yellow mass lying on the floor.
Jellyfish.
Way off.
Dog vomit slime mold. The Legio septica. And this is what it looks like. It looks like all of a sudden it's like, oh. And you know, if you're walking around, if you're walking by, you might just casually glance at it and not think of anything about it. It might be gross. So some got sick there or whatever. But if you look at it closely, you notice that this is an oddity. And so this is a species of plasmodial slime mold. It's a Myxomycetes class. The next slide, let's go a little closer. So slime molds are often referred to as fungi, but they're not. They're not fungi. They're not animals. They're not plants. They're in their own kingdom called Protista. So they're more related to amoebas and certain seaweeds than they are fungi. Although we tend to think they're fungi. They do not have the mycelium to talk about that fungi have. So, okay, next slide. So instead, what this structure is, it is just a large multinucleated mass of protoplasm. And these nuclei are within a cell membrane, has no cell walls like higher plants. And it's called plasmodium. So just think of it as one giant cell. And slime molds are really kind of popular up in the Pacific Northwest. It's where most slime molds get the attention, but we have our own. And, so they appear to travel, and they're not really, well, I guess they're traveling, but as they grow, they grow fast, they develop very fast. So it looks like they're moving. And so their plasmodium part just kind of skirts across the floor of the forest. And it's kind of moves, kind of like an amoeba, I guess. And it's just streaming over the decaying vegetation, and it's eating on microorganisms and debris. And but it doesn't attack living plants or anything. And it doesn't form this shape until it develops this fruiting body where it bears the spores. That's how we stumble across it, is when it's into the reproductive stage. Yep. So if you notice the wispy little plasmodium here, this is what it would look like, and easily overlooked. Right? It's not until it develops this kind of more of a spongy like fruiting body that we actually noticed. So it needs moisture to survive, so that's why we see it after soaking rains and during warm weather. And when its food supply, when it exhausts its food supply or conditions start to dry out, that's when it starts transforming into this shape right here. And so the plasmodial part looks kind of egg white, but then it changes into the epithelium, which is the structure right here that produces the spores. And next slide. So yeah, so this cushion-like thing that we call the epithelium is a reproductive structure, and this is what we call dog vomit. And it happens really fast, so you might not notice it one day. You go back hiking around, and all of a sudden there it is, you know. And so it happens very quickly. And this structure has millions of spores that when we step on it, or an animal steps on it, or even rains upon it, it disperses the spores out into the environment. And they can remain viable for years until the right conditions occur for them to start developing. Yeah. And here's a macroscopic view of one of those little spores starting to form its little slime mold structure on a leaf. It's very easily overlooked unless you walk around with a microscope. Oh, for those of you that are old enough, remember the movie The Blob? So what I just described that creature in The Blob, right? Because it was based on slime molds. And on another note, that was Steve McQueen's first starring role. I'm so sorry. Yeah. But next time. All right, let's move on to the kissing ball. Or botanical vampire, depends on your point of view. It's like Christmas time tradition. So what's the deal with the mistletoe and kissing, right? So it's from a biological point of view, what we know about mistletoes, they have little to do with the expression of love, because these things are evil. And here's your joke of the day. You thought you were gonna come to a talk and have a joke about mistletoe. It looks like. So mistletoe is a parasite, and it slowly destroys its host. It kind of eats it alive. It's kind of like if they're familiar with parasitoid insects. and parasitoids of insects. Mistletoe is the common name for this obligate hemiparasitic plant. It's in the sandalwood family. And it attaches to its host tree or shrubs. And its slender little roots penetrate into the tree or shrub, and it taps into the vascular system, along the xylem, and it just feeds off, this parasite feeds off the plant. And it causes the plant to become weakened, stunted, disfigured. And with heavy infestations will eventually kill its host plant. So death by starvation basically is what mistletoe is doing. And my parasitology instructor, when I was way back in veterinary school, he used to say it's a poor parasite that kills its host. So mistletoes are kind of a poor parasite, right? Because if you kill your host, you kill yourself. So the biological view differs from that of most human males who view the plant as an opportunity to steal a kiss from an otherwise unreceptive female. Okay. And so unlike other parasitic plants, the ones we just talked about, mistletoe do have chlorophyll. So there are hemoparasites in that sense, because at some point in their, these are the true mistletoe, right? They do have photosynthesis because they have chlorophyll. However, as they develop and start taking over and invading the circulatory system of their host plant, they depend less and less on photosynthesis, and more on that host plant for their living. There are 6 species of mistletoe in Colorado, 5 are dwarf mistletoes, and then we have the juniper mistletoe, which is the only member of the true mistletoe. These are known as the leafy mistletoes. This is the only member of the true mistletoe within the Rocky Mountains is the juniper mistletoe. Did I tell you to go forward? There are no dwarf mistletoes that infect junipers in the Rocky Mountain region. Now you can. So they are dioecious plants, which means males, they have male flower plants and female flower plants. Male and female flowers on separate plants. And but the flowers on the mistletoes are often very small and inconspicuous unless you have a microscope, so we wouldn't even know it's a flower. So here's our juniper mistletoe. Heavy infestations. If you walk down Carolyn Trail and look at a lot of those junipers there, sad. It's sad. Really heavy infestation in mistletoe. So what's happening? A juniper mistletoe, the seeds are spread by birds that eat the fruits. They spread because the birds will either regurgitate the seed from the crop or excrete it through their droppings as the fruit passes through their GI tract. Or it might get stuck on their beak, and as they do their bill wiping to clean off their beak, they'll spread it to a branch. And so you'll find mistletoe often where you find where birds like to perch, so it's often high up and it's around water sources. So the juniper mistletoe seeds are coated with an adhesive called viscin. And this causes the seed to get very sticky and it sticks to the wood of the stem of the plant, host plant. And then the viscin hardens and then it begins to germinate and form hostorium. Hostorium, these little wheat-like structures that penetrate into the plant and into the vascular system of the plant. Astoria, by the way, I think that word comes from to drink. Um. And then they'll also produce aerial shoots, and that's where they can do some photosynthesis. So because the juniper mistletoe can produce its own food, it is actually considered a water mineral parasite only. So what it's getting from its juniper trees is the water and minerals that it's producing its own carbohydrates through photosynthesis. The clever parasite because where there are more juniper berries are produced in stands that have mistletoe. What that does is it attracts the birds. And it's the birds that we talked about that help spread the mistletoe. Typically, juniper mistletoe does minor damage to the juniper trees, but during times of drought stress, which seem to have often around here, it just the trees will shut down the transpiration or the release of moisture from the leaves into the air to conserve water. But what the mistletoe's doing, they're still tapping the water from the tree, so that just further stresses the host tree and kills it. So juniper mistletoes don't produce witches' brooms, which we'll talk about with the dwarf mistletoes. Yeah, what they do is you've probably seen those yellowish green parasite shows pictures of those. Kind of rough looking foliage on these tree balls of foliage on these affected trees. And it's usually, again, that stresses the trees. How about the dwarf mistletoes? They are much smaller than the so-called Christmas. What is the genus species of the Christmas? The mistletoe that you buy at Christmas time and to hang in your doorway is that mistletoe is a leaf. It's related to the juniper mistletoe. It's one of the leafy mistletoes, but it is parasitic of like cottonwoods, sycamores, willows, those kind of trees. And so those are easily available in for stores at Christmas time. But the dwarf mistletoe is not related to them at all. In fact, it's one of the smallest vascular plants on the planet. So that's its claim to fame. Its claim to infamy, though, is it's really the kiss of death, the kissing thing. The kiss of death of the conifer trees that it's parasitizing. Yes. Only grows on conifers and it's usually species specific. So there's 5 species in Colorado and they have the same relative effect on the pine trees, the conifer trees, just slow death. And it also, because it weakens the tree, they are very susceptible to other things like the pine bark beetle. So dwarf mistletoes are nearly leafless parasitic plants. Their leaves almost look like scales. Hardly call it a leaf. They infect several species of conifers, so the ponderosa, lodgepole, limber, pinyon pines, and Doug firs. And so their photosynthesis is very limited compared to the juniper mistletoe. So the infected trees, they decline from the top down. And death of the tree occurs very slowly. And it all depends on the severity of infection and the vigor and size of the tree, but generally healthy, heavily infected trees will die within 10 to 15 years. Probably a lot quicker during drought. Looks like. What about these witches' brooms? So the dwarf mistletoes, they can distort the branches that they have infested. And they kind of muck up the growth hormones of the plant. And so they create these kind of weird twiggy growths that you'll see usually up on the top of the trees. Because that's where the birds sit. And so their effect on the tree really depends on the species of mistletoe and what tree it infects. So for example, the lodgepole pine dwarf mistletoe will cause these witches' brooms in ponderosa pines. However, that same species of dwarf mistletoe will produce kind of gall-like structures if it parasitizes limber pine. So they have really different effects. So witches' brooms, basically they extract nutrients from the tree and basically the tree dies from the top down. Next. So why all the kissing and mistletoe? What's all that about? Well, this started as the kissing ball, started in the 18th century in England. And they would gather a bundle of mistletoe and the leafy mistletoe and evergreens. And then a kiss underneath this kissing ball would signify lasting romance, friendship, and and the name mistletoe actually comes from an Anglo-Saxon word, misteleton, which means little dung twig. Because they knew back then that this was spread by bird droppings. And so the word dung is mistled and twig is tan. So basically it meant that plant was growing on poop. So over time that morphed into the word mistletoe. So there you have that. So next Christmas, you can entertain your family and friends with that little bit of wisdom. So here's selected references that I'll make available to you for those that are interested. Next slide, please. Here's some more references. And next slide, and for a bonus, since we've got a little bit more time, along the Krillin Trail, I found this western giant puffball mushroom. Some people eat these things. I guess you got to catch them on the right stage. Anyway, so let me take you through my path because this is what I do. I follow things like, how long is this thing going to last? How long are we going to be able to detect that this is still here? So this is when I discovered it, July 2nd, 2023. Next slide. 27 days later, you kind of start breaking open and all these spores start coming out. Next slide. 54 days later, it's pretty much kind of covered in spores. Next slide. 75 days. 105 days. Just kind of like this mound of spores. Yep. 110 days. Yep. Doesn't seem like it's disturbed. 238 days later, it's snow around it. You can still see where it is, just this pile of spores. 261 days, you can still recognize where it was. 300 days. 316 days. 360 days. And finally, this past July 30th, 2 years later, I don't know where it is. So it takes that long to decompose. So there's all those spores, right? So all those spores are scattered everywhere in that environment. And it's like, okay, how come we don't see any giant puffballs around all the time? Well, it's conditions have to be just right for them to develop the puffball. In the meantime, all their mycelium that is developed from all those are under the ground, just waiting for the right time for then the giant puffball to. And the year in 2020. In 2023, when I took that picture, when we were doing our trail work. Especially along the Batterson Loop Trail, there's lots of those western giant puffballs in that area as well. So. Cool. Anybody have any questions? Oh, sorry. So.
Have you ever looked at the, it's work that the Nature Conservancy did at the, near the South Platte River from Wood River, Nebraska, the Conservancy there. That one of the biologists there has done a full study on, has produced this phenomenal book on 1 meter of land. And they took 1 meter, marked it off, and like every day took photographs and looked at species and how many species could exist. And, you know, so like which bird flew in, which rabbit walked across, which grass came up or flower or, and but it's just, it's fascinating.
I did that in high school biology.
1 meter of land.
We had in high school biology, we had a little plot, not that big. It was a tiny little plot, and we were supposed to gather things that passed through there and stuff. It's not like we sat there and watched it. Like there's a book called anyways, the guy he had a very similar to what you're talking about. It's it's what the Buddhist, so what's the term the Buddhists used for when he sat and just studied this one spot. And so he did that just about every day of the year, this one spot, and he would not only enumerate what was passing through this area, but also around it, like the sounds, the birds migration and stuff. And that's a good read. That's probably, you might find that interesting if you get a hold of that and tell what it's like. I haven't known it. All right, well, thanks for showing up. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. We always knew you were a fun guy. Appreciate you coming.
We're always getting punished by me.
Good. Do we happen to know what we're starting next season with yet?
No.
Okay. But we'll still go April through September, second Tuesday of the month. For now, we'll expect the same time. And check out the website, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.